I'll leave that for sure over there. I know I will.
Hello and welcome to the Good Old Days, our program focusing on the history of Raynham. Actually, we talk about the history and also about what's going on today, because what happens today is tomorrow's history. I'm Pat Riley and our host is Don McKinnon. Welcome, Don.
Thank you, Patricia. We always have a good time, and we have today P. Burke Fountain, who is a member of the planning board since, I think, when did the Mayflower come in? I'm trying to think of it. What year?
Well, it's 23 years. I think it was 91.
Burke is also a long-time, lifelong resident of Raynham, correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So,
Burke's aunt and I were chums in the early days, and she was on the Council on Aging.
For 25 or 30 years.
Yes, and she was active when the Council on Aging was in Gilmore Hall. And she showed up one day and she says, "Oh, you and I have a vehicle, Donald." And I said, "Oh, we do. That's good, Bernice. Where do we keep the vehicle?" She said, "That's not the point." She said, "The vehicle will drive elders to their appointments." And that was the first time in the history of the town of Raynham that I don't know how she got a hold of that vehicle. Or I'm not even sure who drove it. Maybe she did. I don't remember. But she was feisty. She got things done. And she was the first to start now, what do we call it? We have a name for it now, for driving the citizens about in professional vehicles, but I don't know, it wasn't a convertible with the top down, but it was a blue-collar type of a vehicle at that time.
we're talking about Bernice Fountain.
Bernice Fountain.
Also,
Burke's
Conservation
aunt.
Commission was
Aunt
Oh,
was
at
with-
least 25 years
for
on
many,
that.
many
That's right.
years, yes.
She and Johnny Welch, and served with, who was the name of the lady that we've got her dedication at the anchor site there?
Mrs. Pine?
Dora Pine.
Dora Pine.
Dora Pine was great. You could be talking conservation. She talked strict conservation. And all of a sudden she'd say, "Who's pitching today?" She'd go into the Boston Red Sox talk. She was really worth the price.
But Burke, tell us a little bit about yourself. You grew up in Raynham, went to the Raynham schools.
BR?
Well,
I don't mean
went
to
to
date you
Raynham
whatsoever.
schools through 8th grade. I did go to Coyle High
Oh,
and Stonehill.
Now, Raynham schools, would that have been the center school, which is now the town office building?
My father and I both went to the center school.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
you should have an old picture in there somewhere in the Sullivan room
Yeah.
of you and your dad.
And then on to Merrill and La Liberty?
I was in the first class in the Liberty,
Okay.
8th grade, when they opened it in 65 or whatever.
Okay. And then you went to Coyle.
Yep.
And where did you head after Coyle?
Stonehill.
That's when Coyle
not
was
too far.
Coyle, right? It
That's
wasn't-
right. That was
wasn't-
real Coyle.
It wasn't Coyle Cassidy. I do say about the guys, though, talk about chauvinists. When they moved over, they took the name first. It's not Cassidy Coyle, although the girls were there first, right? It's Coyle Cassidy. And the old
sounds
Coyle
better.
guys say, "Well, I went there when it was Coyle." And Stonehill.
Very good school.
Oh, Stonehill's a great school.
Now, did you go to Stonehill because you were thinking of going into the field of law, or was it just natural after Coyle to go to Stonehill?
It was a little bit natural. I can't remember why I ended up there, but I ended up there. Glad I did.
You didn't
Glad I
walk
went.
up there.
Glad I
You
went
could-
back then when it was, I think, $1,600 a year versus 50,000
and you
or whatever.
and you were 15 minutes away.
Yeah, it was.
Now, did you
convenient.
live in or did you stay at home? No,
lived
my
at
era
home.
didn't. My era didn't. My 3 kids, none of them lived in. They all commuted. But you commuted, but basically you were almost living in. You were probably as close as anyone could be that doesn't live in Easton itself. Because
Oh, yeah, it was.
you go
it
down
was 15,
Elm Street and right on
Yeah.
138.
It
And,
was a 15-minute ride.
yeah, yeah.
But
Convenient.
yeah,
And a great
I
school.
worked all the time, so
That's right. You worked on the highway there for a while, didn't you?
I worked 9 years at Howard Johnson's.
Really?
Now, was Howard Johnson's on the highway at the time?
Yeah.
Because that's where, I remember Burke working there. You worked in the
On
kitchen.
Route 24. Well, I did everything along the way, but mostly I was a cook, yeah.
Where did the years go, huh?
I know.
And what law school now?
New England School of Law.
Is that in Boston?
Yes, it's
So-
now New England Law.
So did you take the bus in or did you live in?
First year I lived in Boston. Second year I took the bus. The third year I set my schedule up so I only had to go in 2 or 3 days a week, so I drove.
Oh,
But I went from 9 to 9 those days,
Right.
so.
but you actually parked in Boston.
I parked, the school was on Newbury Street, and I used
It
to
was
walk
on
down.
Newbury. Is it still there?
No. Oh,
Okay.
they built a fancy place on Stewart Street, I think it is.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah, but,
because Newbury Street's fancy.
Well, it is.
Yes.
And it was even then.
Yeah.
But I used to park for free out on the street in what you would call, I guess, the South End or something.
Wow, wow. I did that for a while, in around the train station, the North Station. Parked my Crosley in around there.
Well, my Ford Falcon.
Yeah, isn't that something though? Wow. So what year did you graduate from the law school?
79.
And then into partnership originally, or did you?
Well, of course, I was an underling, but I went to work for George Fairbanks. And I was
And
there.
that was on Route 44.
So on Route 44, we moved about 3 or 4 times.
One of the times, I think, is now a chiropractor there, and there was
Yeah.
Lewis, the lawyer, or somebody there for.
We were in Dave Hutchinson's building on Church Green.
Oh,
Then we
on Church Green.
Then we moved to Mrs. Jordan's dress shop.
And where was that? What was that?
It's now VIP Pet or something
Oh, on 44?
on 44.
Oh, all right.
I don't know if you remember.
Oh, yeah.
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 But she had a dress shop, and my mother used to say what wonderful work she did. And George Fairbanks loved computers and added on to the building a computer store.
Wow. And then you moved down to the.
Then we moved down to 109 Dean Street, which is where the chiropractor is
Right
now.
now. If people
Yeah.
familiar. My son used to deliver papers there, and you guys have a drive down to get into the parking lot, and I think he had to swim sometimes to get down there, because there was occasionally water.
There's occasionally water for sure. Yep.
Now, why law? Is that something, a field you always thought you wanted to go into, or what led you to that, in that direction?
It's a really good question. I don't know the answer. I guess I got out of college, still didn't know what I wanted to do, and somehow ended up in law school.
You became a professional student for a short
Well,
period of time with a Ford.
I was working on that, yes, yes. But finally, I had to actually go get a job,
And because you never met Howard Johnson, so you had to go and get a job.
right?
Now, so your law practice is now in Taunton, Raynham?
Yeah,
Well,
Taunton.
Taunton, yeah.
Taunton,
right.
I'm on the Taunton side. Yeah.
Okay, on 44.
I'm Route 44.
And you're by yourself? You don't have any partners at this point?
No partners, been by myself since 1987.
And what kind of law do you practice?
Real estate, wills and probate, small business. That's about it.
And obviously you enjoy it to be doing it as long as you have been doing it.
I enjoy it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, what about planning board? How did you, now, was that an elective position when you first ran for that, or was it appointed back then, or?
It was always elected.
Okay.
Somebody was retiring, moving out of town or something in the middle of a term, and I actually got a phone call and said, we're looking for somebody, and obviously you have some credentials, would you be willing to do it?
It wasn't Don that called you, because he has a tendency of recruiting people like that.
I do, in my day.
I have
did
to
that.
say, it was so long ago,
I
I
don't
don't remember
remember
who it was.
So
but-
each of us don't remember.
Yeah,
It
but-
could have been, but it
But,
probably.
Right.
but somebody called, and I said, sure, I'd give it a try. And so I was appointed for a few years, and then I've been running ever since.
You're probably the longest serving member at this time?
Henry Ellis
Henry Ellis, okay.
would
But
be the
when did
longest.
Henry come on?
Well, I don't know.
I think after you.
Oh, no. No, I'm
You-
sure it was a couple of years before me. But then he was out for a few years somewhere in the middle. So I guess you could call me the
You're the
longest
longest.
continuously serving.
We
Okay.
use those terms. Right.
So the planning board has how many members?
5.
5 members. And you work with the town planner?
We do.
Okay. You
And
meet,
he's kind of their right-hand man.
uh-huh.
Town planner.
You meet twice a month, is it still?
Twice a month.
And what does the planning board do?
We do, the two biggest things would be subdivisions, residential subdivisions. A builder wants to come in and build a road. Well, we tell them the standards for the road and the design of the road that we want and how many house lots he can get out of the land that he has and so on. And then as the construction goes on, of course, we're concerned about the road getting done, not half done with a bunch of people living there, and then the developer goes bust. But that's one job, and the other one is with commercial property, which only started since I got there. We call it site plan review. Any commercial development, again, not a whole subdivision, but just one lot, you want to put in a gas station or whatever, you have to come to us and we will talk about your parking lots and your access onto the roadway and signage and setbacks and so on.
And then, of course, if someone proposes a zoning change or whatever, it usually goes to the planning board, because I know the planning board will give a recommendation usually at town meeting.
We are allowed to propose zoning changes, Board of Selectmen are allowed to, and any 10 citizens can put a petition in to make a zoning change. And yes, we have a public hearing, so everybody gets to ask questions, gets to learn what it's about, and we will make a recommendation to the town meeting as to whether we like the idea or not. And it goes to the town meeting, and the recommendation, either for or against, is read, and of course then questions can be asked. But it's the town meeting that then makes the decision.
How much flexibility does the planning board have? I mean, is a lot of it prescribed by law or by existing regulations? How much discretion do you actually have? It probably depends on the particular case.
Well, it does, but there are statutes we have to follow, and there are rules and, well, there are regulations at the state level, and then the town has its own zoning laws, its own planning board rules and regulations. So we have some leeway. If someone comes in and they follow every single rule and regulation, we have to approve it. We don't have any say, but usually they want to come in and say, we'd really like to not put a sidewalk on both sides. Of course, it saves them money. As soon as they start asking for favors, we can start asking for favors too. Like money towards putting lights in on Route 44 and Route 138. Of course, Walmart came in and wanted to do various things, and we said, well, you're going to increase the traffic. We want some traffic lights.
Sure. That Walmart on 138, that traffic light near there is really very helpful for anybody who's trying to get out on
One of the planning
138.
board may have, though, it's difficult enforcing unless the rest of the town cooperates, because you set the rules and then somebody else often has to enforce them. We've still got our policemen up at the end of Center Street,
Right.
and someday there's supposed to be a traffic light up there, but there's nothing you can do about it until it's...
No, but that was agreed to, that they'll pay for a policeman to stand there until the light goes
Until the
in.
light goes in.
Now, in, I guess it would be Middleborough, Ocean Spray, there's been a policeman standing out there every night for 10, 15, 20 years.
Really?
4 hours guaranteed,
I-
not bad.
I guess.
And they do a good job, some of them. I'm sure they do. I don't want to get fresh. But no, they do good.
No, 138 is tough, though. I wouldn't want to stand in the middle of that road.
No, well, they don't. You don't have to worry about
Yeah,
that.
I've seen them do it.
Yeah, well, they do. They come out when they have to, right?
Yeah.
They do a good job.
But,
And the
but as
traffic
far
light
as
at King Philip Street is working really
Oh.
Yeah,
well.
that's great.
that's wonderful.
That's great.
Yeah.
And it does
Big
help
help.
First Street, as much as First Street, it's their nature, which I don't blame them to complain about it. I've always felt if you got a traffic light, you do have a break when you can do something.
Exactly.
And that's,
It's the same thing at my office. There's the set of lights in each direction, and there's probably 4 minutes for a complete pattern of all the light. It's about 20
sure you
seconds, about 20 seconds out of every 4 minutes that I can get out of my parking lot, no problem.
But you have that down, I'm sure.
Hey, well, you do, you get, you learn.
You get to know
You
it.
learn, yeah. But you said about enforcing rules, yes.
Yeah.
Let's say with commercial, one of the things we look at is lighting. You know, we don't want residential neighbors having lights on shining in their bedroom all night. But once it goes up, once we approve it, if they put in extra lights, then yes, it's up to the zoning enforcement officer and building department to take over.
We did have one up near, I don't know, it's hard to tell which comes first, the chicken or the egg on these committees sometimes, but we did have one near Donnie Francis's house. There's a restaurant that's been there forever. It's a residential kind of a location though, and they actually had lights that went into the bedroom across the street, so people were a little upset. Unfortunately, there's a knack to making money in those kind of neighborhoods, and they haven't found it again since the original owners. The original owners did very well there, and people, the last one we had, there were guys with Super Bowl rings coming in, and they were going to make a fortune. Sports bar.
Yeah. I know it's, you're talking about what was B.B. Binks.
Yes.
I know that place was packed for years
That's
and
right.
years.
That's right.
And since then, it's been 3 or 4,
As you and Howard Johnson would say, it's all in the cooks.
I guess. I guess.
Because we would go, no, really though, when they reopen every time, my wife and I will go in that restaurant and we'll judge it, and we don't go back, unfortunately. So good cooks are hard to find.
Now, looking back over the 20-plus years that you've served on the planning board, Burke, what would you say you're most proud of, or anything jump to mind that you think the planning board has made a significant difference in the town of Raynham?
Well, one of the things was putting in site plan review.
Okay.
When I started, we didn't have that. And commercial properties, you know, they just did what they wanted. And one of the arguments I had then was, look, if you're building a residential subdivision, 4 or 5 houses, you're going to have 20 cars a day. We're doing all this work designing the road, and yet you have the Shaw's Plaza, people using that as a cut-through between 44 and South
It's a regular street.
and you have 1,000 cars, 2,000 cars a day, and we're not going to regulate that.
Absolutely.
So that was probably the biggest change.
Don, during your time serving as selectman, were there any big issues that you dealt with, planning board
Trying to
wise?
remember which crisscrossed. Our biggest ones were usually on liquor licenses. Generally speaking, you think we'd be litigated being selectmen, but very seldom. But in a liquor license, we'd be litigated. And Board of Health, we'd be litigated. So those are the things that came to us. But I don't think we crossed paths that much.
No.
A zoning board change, though, can bring out the people to town meeting, that's for sure.
It sure can.
They changed the numbers at one. There was a fellow years ago, and at that time there were 2 different amounts. More, I believe, there was something about the numbers that had to be there for zoning and the ones that had to be there for the regular town meeting. The numbers, I believe it was.
Oh, number of citizens there?
That were present.
Oh.
And the number changed, and this fellow, he changed the numbers. He worked for years, and he changed the numbers somewhere. And then I didn't see him again, and I saw him down the market, and I said, since you changed the numbers, you don't come. He said, I'm trying to prevent a quorum. So by not coming, he thought he was preventing the quorum. I said, well, that's thinking, though. That's really good.
Yeah, yeah.
And we all miss you.
But the quorum has come down 2 or 3
Now
times.
it's,
Even for the gym.
Burke and I will agree, I believe, that times have changed since Ray and Ruth Chappell used to go to every town meeting. There are certain people that went to every town meeting, and now it's a difficult time to get people to come to town meetings.
Well, I know some towns have instituted several things. Start earlier, for one, start at 6 o'clock. Now, the planning board used to start at 7 and went to 6:30, and now we're at 6 o'clock. And I notice a lot of towns do that. But for town meeting, towns are doing it earlier. and with a guarantee that it'll be done at 9 o'clock.
Wow.
And if it has to go another night, it goes another night. But
That's a good plan.
But 9 o'clock, you're out of there. Sometimes if I have court or a busy day the next day, I don't want to go and get stuck there till midnight.
Sure.
You know. And they'll, some places sell sandwiches and things too. So, you know, you don't have to go home. You can come straight from work and
It's a good
That's an
idea.
idea.
We'll have to think
and
about that
have
one.
have a good time at town meeting.
That's absolutely
And
right.
someone from planning board, and usually you being the senior member could delegate this, someone has to read off usually. What was the name of the fellow? He moved out of town, but he used to read them all the time. He lived over around Leonard Street or over around that section of town.
Was it Carl Carlson?
Carl
Oh,
Carlson,
yeah. Oh, well, he was the clerk.
that'll teach him.
Yeah.
Carl had to read
yeah.
read the whole thing. Now I think it's the town planner probably reads it or something of this nature, but it's not a pleasant thing to do, and usually when they start to read it, people groan. You can, oh, here we go with planning board. The planning board had a meeting, and they voted X amount. And
But it's important because if you're at
It's
the
the
town
law.
meeting, right, and at your town meeting,
Yeah.
you don't know, you haven't researched it, you
Yeah.
don't know, and the planning board has looked into it and, you know, made a,
It's interesting
Educated
that people have, many
decision.
have turned on the town meeting, but in point of fact, if they make up their mind to go, and they have someone who can be a spokesman, they can turn that meeting upside down, and they can prevent zoning that, you know, you've had it in around where Walmart and Market Basket is, those citizens, and there are people that can march on it, and they'll get up and they'll stand up there. It'll just be 3 or 4 of them, and they'll turn the whole thing around
Wow.
and they don't have to be Philadelphia lawyers, as they say. Just everyday folks stand up there and say, no, this is my neighborhood and I don't want it. People say, well, if they don't want it, it's their neighborhood, so they go ahead and do it. So,
any big issues before the planning board, any hearings that you've had that have brought a lot of people?
138.
138.
We just have to, if things get boring, we just,
this is like when the selectmen want to get a quorum, we used to bring up the leash law, or the control of animals, anything you get your quorum overnight. But with the planning board, it's 138. And the people, they will march out. They will come out, those people. And there's justification. I always thought, of course, I love Bill Chickering, and he was one of those legendary people we had. And Bill's the one who wrote he built the roads off of 138. That was his First Street, and Chickering is his subdivision, if you will. And I always thought if he come down, instead of just the water pipe, down onto King Philip Street, for that street, he would have probably avoided an awful lot of it. But for Bill, every house, even the ones that leaned a little, counted. So he kept them there, and it was never. Did they ever address getting out of First Street other than on 138 over onto King Philip?
I don't think so. I think you have wetlands issues.
Is that what it is? Yeah. Because what Bill did was he built the pipe right through his own. People say, well, if a person, at least when they own their own lot, they won't do it. Bill would do it to his own lot. And he did it on a lot off of King Philip, putting a major water pipe through so that he actually had to turn the house sideways to up on King Philip Street. It's still there, the situation. I don't know when that stops, but. And then there was a thing with the water district up where Walmart is now, the new Walmart. There's some transition going on with the water district as to the pumping stations up there or something of that nature? No?
I'm not sure about that. Sewer has been an issue.
Up in that district there,
Well,
yeah.
tying Walmart into the,
We had, everybody wanted the money. They had money set aside in an account for Market Basket to bring the pipe up from Taunton. And I forget the name of the fellow, but there was a fellow, councilman from Taunton, that was adamant that that pipe in Taunton, which came down to like in around where the root beer stand was, and then it would have been brought up to where Market Basket is, but he was determined that it was going to go up to the track on 138, and no way did he want that pipe, so he fought us all the way. And Market Basket had put a fairly good amount of money into the kitty to bring that pipe up, and of course it never was brought up, but it came the other way in the back door. Now it has in the back door. And you're right, Burke, it's sewer sometimes that gets confusing. Everybody wanted that money. And Mark, you know, you only have to know Mark for a day or two to realize Mark wouldn't release the money at all. It was sat there and it belonged to Market Basket, and it was Market Basket's money. And we didn't want to return it to Market Basket. Market Basket, I don't think, quite understood that we were sitting there with it. So finally, we did get a ruling out of Mark, I believe, that it was, let me see whose it was, the sewer departments. So it went into the sewer budget. So sometimes these budgets as to who controls the money, the thing I've got a concern about is, and I don't know whether the planning board has ever addressed it, the number of streets that are not accepted. That X amount of dollars is set aside for that street, and then the years go by, and the money suddenly isn't enough, and somebody does something else, and then the next thing you know, there the street sits. Anything ever, is that ever brought up at a meeting as to the number of streets? That because we've had arguments, not arguments, we don't argue, right? Raynham. We had disputes on whether they would plow a street that was unaccepted. And my contention, when I was a selectman, if a person is a taxpayer and they gotta get to work to pay their taxes, you'd best plow their street so that they could get going. Any, no talk?
I don't, now Taunton and Brockton and a couple other places I know have many unaccepted streets. I don't think Raynham has many.
Not that many?
No, no. Well, we make the developer plow the road and maintain the road while they own it until it's accepted.
The street we seemed to have trouble with was the one behind Stop and Shop. Is that Commercial? No, it's not Commercial Street. I forget what the name. It was right in back of Stop and Shop. As a matter of fact, Arts International Bakery. What a great name. Why don't we think of names like that, right? Call Art.
But of course, that street went into bankruptcy court,
That's why
which
it went bankrupt.
made a mess out of everything. And then we ended up with a 40B project down there, and
It wasn't funny, but the strangest thing I ever saw was a developer took houses on that street and built them at cost, not cost. In other words, they were not 40Bs. And there was a distance between the two houses, and everybody said, oh, this is very, very nice. And then when they sold them, then they put the 40Bs in between them. So suddenly, people were eating out of each other's backyards. And they're nice homes.
they are nice homes. They are very close. You better like your neighbors.
You better like your neighbors, that's right.
Now, I understand there's a new big development coming in off of Locust and Pleasant Street in that area there of single-family homes.
Being talked about. It's been
Okay.
being talked about for 30
Locust
years, but
and
Really? Pleasant Street.
I think it's going to happen this time.
Really?
Okay,
Something
yeah.
like
Won't that have
90
to come?
single-family homes or
You know, my
something?
family connection lives on,
Yeah.
in that particular area.
It's large,
And those
Burke, correct?
streets, whether they
Well,
connect or not.
back 30 years ago, and I forget the man's name, he was,
Well,
he had a lumber yard or something over in Brockton.
oh,
My understanding.
Kelleher.
Kelleher. And he got it approved for 125 lots or something.
Oh, my goodness.
Got in trouble with the IRS, never got built. Eventually he died, but there's tax bills for 125 buildable lots.
Really?
And,
there's wetlands in that general area.
well, and there's wetlands, and the wetlands have moved. People might not believe it, but they do move. And
You wait long enough.
and you've waited long enough. And then the laws changed, and there was going to be a crossing of the wetlands. You put a bridge over it. They don't let you do that anymore. And so now we're looking at approximately 65 house lots.
Really?
And there's a $500,000 tax bill past due.
Doing that.
Because again, it's 65 lots, or and the taxes on a vacant lot are 1,500,
So things
2,000
happen in
a
a
year.
small town.
I guess.
27
guess.
seconds.
Oh my goodness, we're out of time.
It's Pat's line to say,
See?
where does the
Yeah.
time go?
Yes, but we want to thank you very much for coming, Burke,
welcome.
and sharing
Good to
some
be
of your
here.
experience and knowledge with us. And Dawn, we will be back
Yes.
later this month with our next episode of The Good Old Days. We want to thank all of you for being with us as well. We'll see you on our next episode.
Thanks very much, Burke, for